Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is it helpful or harmful to the readiness of the U.S. military? And will it truly make warfighting more lethal against our enemies? Hi folks, and welcome back to the Storm and Cellar. Today we'll take a look at a video made by the current Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, who will most likely be nominated by the President to replace General Milley as the next Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Before we get started, I'd just like to say that throughout my Air Force career, I could care less about the color or sex of an airman. I mentored and promoted those who got the job done, regardless of race or sex. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at his video and I'll give my thoughts.
As the Commander of Pacific Air Forces, a senior leader in our Air Force, and an African American, many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. Here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. I'm thinking about protests in my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty.
As sad as it was for a man like George Floyd to die the way he did, Floyd was a career criminal and drug addict who once put a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach. By his own actions, he was a blight on society. It's even sadder that the general wants to use Floyd as an example for other hard-working and dedicated blacks in the United States Air Force.
The equality expressed in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that I've sworn my adult life to support and defend. And thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about living in two worlds, each with their own perspective and views.
It's hard for me to look at a guy who's been pushed through the ranks to become Pacific Air Force's commander, Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, and probably rise to the highest rank as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to whine about his hard road to the top. Hey, get in line, buddy. We all had a hard road.
I'm thinking about my sister and I being the only African Americans in our entire elementary school and trying to fit in.
Two worlds and fitting in? Is that any different than the new kid at school, the little fat kid, or the geek in the school? I wonder why his parents sent him to a predominantly white school. Perhaps for a better education?
I'm thinking about then going to a high school where roughly half the students were African American and trying to fit in.
High school was half black, so what's the problem? All teenagers try to fit into one group or another. It's just the way it is.
I'm thinking about my Air Force career, where I was often the only African American in my squadron, or as a senior officer, the only African American in the room. I'm thinking about wearing the same flight suit with the same wings on my chest as my peers, and they being questioned by another military member, are you a pilot?
You were the only fighter pilot because blacks have not typically wanted to fly in the United States Air Force or didn't meet the qualifications. The top 10% of ROTC and OTS get selected for pilot training. As for the wings, trust me, every military member don't know the difference of the wings we wear. Be a pilot, nav, combat systems officer, air battle manager, non-rated, just give me a break, okay?
I'm thinking about how I sometimes felt my comments were perceived to represent the African American perspective, when it's just my perspective informed by being African American. I'm thinking about some of the insensitive comments made without awareness by others. I'm thinking about being a captain at the Oak Club with my squadron and being told by other African Americans that I wasn't black enough since I was spending more time with my squadron than with them.
Perspective? There needs to be just one perspective in the military, and that's the team perspective. Perhaps those who said he wasn't black enough just didn't understand what team meant. A flying squadron, especially for fighter guys and gals, is the epitome of team because they're the ones that will put your life in their hands.
I'm thinking about my mentors and how rarely I had a mentor that looked like me. I'm thinking about the sound advice that has led to my success. And even so, most of my mentors could not relate to my experience as an African American.
Looks like their mentorship definitely didn't hurt him to move up through the ranks.
I'm thinking about the pressure I felt to perform error-free, especially for supervisors I perceived had expected less from me as an African American. I think about having to represent by working twice as hard to prove their expectations and perceptions of African Americans were invalid.
I'm going to have to throw the bullshit flag on this one. In the flying game, we all have to strive to be error-free because by not doing so costs lives. How many times was I shot in the face by another crew member, a fighter pilot, or my commander or ops officer for not being up to the mark on a particular thing? You need to man up there, buddy. Hell, we all had to work twice as hard as others if we expected to progress. As for unfairly treated, how many white airmen thought my discipline and punishment might have been unfair to them? It's just the way life is.
I'm thinking about the airmen that have lived through similar experiences and feelings as mine, or who were either consciously or unconsciously unfairly treated. Conversely, I'm thinking about the airmen who don't have a life similar to mine and don't have to navigate through two worlds.
There's only two worlds if you elect to define it as two worlds. Everyone comes from different backgrounds in the military. The secret is to adopt the military lifestyle and realize you're doing something bigger than most Americans.
I'm thinking about how these airmen view racism, whether they don't see it as a problem since it doesn't happen to them, or whether they're empathetic. I'm thinking about our two sons. Now we had to prepare them to live in two worlds. I'm thinking about the frank and emotional conversations my wife and I have had with them just this past week as we discuss the situations that have led to the protests around our country.
I assume you're also talking to your sons about how BLM and Antifa burned down predominantly black neighborhoods and black businesses, how black on black murder is through the roof, and how the black race has been eradicated through abortion.
Finally, I'm thinking about my historic nomination to be the first African American to serve as the Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm thinking about the African Americans that went before me to make this opportunity possible.
Yes, how through hard work, dedication, and excellence you have moved up to the highest position in the United States Air Force.
I'm thinking about the immense expectations that come with this historic nomination, particularly through the lens of current events plaguing our nation. I'm thinking about how I may have fallen short in my career and will likely continue falling short living up to all those expectations. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden. I can't fix centuries of racism in our country, nor can I fix decades of discrimination that may have impacted members of our Air Force. I'm thinking about how I can make improvements, personally, professionally, and institutionally, so that all airmen, both today and tomorrow, appreciate the value of diversity and can serve in an environment where they can reach their full potential.
Yeah, every airman should have the same way to the top. However, selecting, promoting, and pushing unqualified airmen based on creed, color, or sex is a detriment to good order and discipline, and in the end will not only cost lives, but make the Air Force less effective. I saw hundreds of airmen of all colors get weeded out through the years by not giving it the extra effort.
I think I don't have all the answers on how to create such an environment, whether here in PACAF or across our Air Force. I'm thinking about, without clear-cut answers, I just want to have the wisdom and knowledge to lead during difficult times like these. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead, participate in, and listen to necessary conversations on racism, diversity, and inclusion. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead those willing to take committed and sustained action to make our Air Force better. That's what I'm thinking about. I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make a difference.
I was with you right up until the DEI part. DEI is the stake in the heart of cohesion and effectiveness. Okay, folks, all I see here is a whiny general and a General Milley on steroids. Last year, General Brown and other leaders signed their names to one of the most horrendous, racist documents ever produced by the modern military. The topic of the Air Force memorandum was officer quotas set by race and gender. So let me get this straight. Roughly 30% of the population is white men, and most will be replaced by minorities. General Brown said his goal was for the white male to become the minority in the Air Force. Unfortunately for him, his recruiting numbers have tanked during his time as Chief of Staff, and a lot of it due to the DEI problems that they have. I don't care what he says, by eliminating the number of white male officers and enlisted leadership, it will be impossible to sustain a viable combat force. Arbitrarily putting minorities in leadership strictly on race rather than merit-based is suicide. Perhaps General Brown needs to peel the onion back and evaluate why there's a lack of young black men in the officer ranks. My son taught in the inner city schools, and he said not only was a large part of his graduating seniors reading on the 6th grade level, but the administration wanted him to encourage them all to go to college. So poor education systems in the inner cities, fatherless homes, which have contributed to high school dropout rates, and high crime communities all lead to a much smaller pool to select from for military service, especially in the officer ranks. Look, my advice is for the Senate to not select this kamikaze general as the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If selected, you'll see the entire military dive into a spiral mort. Okay, if you like this video, click the like button and follow the channel. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. So until next time, make sure your takeoff and landings equal.